welcome to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. We are broadcasting live from the mountains of Southern California, an area where we have a great view of World War III. Sharon, please tell us about this latest war.
This is the war on podcasters.
Wait a minute, that's us. What the hell?
Well, actually, this is live radio. But I started as a podcaster. I started out on Talk Network, which was a podcast network, although it kind of sounded like radio, but everything was pre-recorded. So my introduction into radio started about a year ago when I signed on with those guys, which was a natural news offshoot owned by Mike Adams. And needless to say, this network imploded due to the gigantic ego of Mike Adams. And now I'm here.
What a surprise.
And now I'm here on American Freedom Radio. And I like this because it's live. And I just go on and do my broadcast every week. And it goes out everywhere in real time.
And I like this because I'm here too with you.
So it's been a great journey for me in media in this past year. And now I don't have to worry so much about recording my own broadcast. But when I first started, I was using a software called Pamela with Skype, and that's what everyone uses for podcasts. And what I've noticed is Pamela stopped working for many people and for most people.
Including us.
Anybody with a Skype update, which you need in order to do a podcast, because you have to be able to have multiple people on the call. So Pamela stopped working, and I was using it to record this show on my own, but I don't have to do that because we're live and there's archives, but I just like to. And then I noticed it stopped working. My theory was, I think it's a Skype update that did this. And
that makes perfect sense because, and I thought about this with you too. I kind of sat down for a second and I said, okay, well, who is using Pamela mostly? It's people that are probably talking about subversive topics and people who need to hold it so that they can maybe make a YouTube video and get it out, more en masse. So right there, there's a bunch of people we're talking about right off the bat who are they're not who the companies want to be getting their message out,
right.
To put it quite plainly.
Okay, so let's go over the history of Skype, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but, I think that most people probably know that their conversations are being recorded and everything's being kept in a database somewhere. That's something that we've become used to.
Well, that's a given, yeah.
But let's talk about the history of Skype. Who owns it?
Well, I jotted down some interesting facts. So, first of all, Skype came into existence in August of 2003. I think just a handful of programmers came up with it. I looked at their names and they're virtually impossible to mention. So, well, to pronounce, that is. So I'm not even going to try, lest I embarrass myself on live radio. So anyhow, this company was chugging along for a couple years, and in September of 2005, it was sold to eBay for $2.6 billion. That's with a B, billion. And then it proceeded to go along for another few years. And here's an interesting fact. This I found really, really interesting. So in September of 2009, 4 years after the initial acquisition, Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, amongst others, acquired 65% of the controlling interest in Skype for $1.9 billion from eBay. That's the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. What could they possibly want? What's their role in this? They got the whole hockey thing down. What do they want with Skype?
Well, it's a pension company too, so it's a little odd. Okay, they invested in Skype, and then they sold Skype.
And then the most recent acquisition in May of 2011 was by Microsoft, and they paid precisely $8.5 billion to acquire it from eBay. So Microsoft is the current owner, so it stands to reason that there's certain topics they wouldn't want getting out there. So again, it would also stand to reason that these Skype updates, which are so profuse, are maybe doing something to inhibit the ability of these third-party softwares to do the recording.
Well, yeah, and I thought about the Skype updates as ways to install new surveillance. I figured that that's probably going on all the time. I
Also
don't
a
even
given.
read the agreement anymore because I know I'm giving up privacy rights when I use these programs and when I go online. I do use Start Page as my search, which is an alternative to Google that gives you more privacy. But anyway, with the Skype updates, I was using Pamela for a long time. It stopped working. I tried another software called Callburner that was recommended on this discussion board, which is a Skype discussion board on the topic. I tried that. I tried the MP3 recorder that was recommended by discussion board. And first off, the Callburner worked until the next Skype update, then it stopped working. And this was like within days. And
Well,
then
that's like a dead giveaway, isn't it?
well, it's more evidence to support my claim that I think these Skype updates are the problem. But now I have the proof. I was on a support ticket with Pamela, and they told me they had no idea what the problem was. And then they got back to me later, and they said that it was the Skype update that caused the problem. And they suggested reverting. Anyway, what I'm noticing here, and I see many, many podcasters posting on these message boards, many people are saying, what am I going to do? This is ruining my podcast. So I'm seeing that Microsoft is interfering with the independent media pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it all the time. I don't even want to say this, but I'm going to calls drop all the time on American Freedom Radio when we didn't drop. When the interviewer
Yes.
is talking to somebody, they may respond with something that's very subversive regarding certain entities or people or corporations.
Yeah,
and then,
I think if anyone checks out our episode we did with Laura Eisenhower, that there's an example of that virtually every 7 or 8 seconds.
yeah, it just drops like crazy every
And the
time.
Wi-Fi too.
Well,
That's
yeah,
a
and
big cause of that.
It's easy for them to infiltrate those signals.
Yeah, when it's out in the open air, it's easy to sabotage it.
We haven't dropped yet, so let's drop the topic and move on to Skype once again. I just wanted to say that for the podcasters, it's been a great hindrance. And what we've had to do as podcasters is move to the next level of recording software. And it takes much more of a challenge. You have to install virtual mixing boards. You have to learn to use real recording software, which I do because I engineered and produced music for years. So I do know how to. But it still was a conundrum. This is what I see as making it more and more difficult for people, but there are ways around it and people are figuring it out. So the information will always go out.
Yes.
And we're very thankful to have a place to do this here on American Freedom Radio. And so I would just take a moment to ask you to please donate because our network is growing and we need to stay on the air. There's so much valuable information that's being put out here. So please donate and help us out.
Yes, come to AmericanFreedomRadio.com. You'll see a donate button. You can click that. Lots of new shows. I know Jordan Maxwell just started his new show, his maiden episode, and there's a couple others.
It was really good, too.
And we'll actually have a guest later from one of the new shows, Green Eyed Monster, coming on with us in hour 2. But yes, please come to AmericanFreedomRadio.com and click that donate button because we all need the support here. And also you can come to our website, thekembo.com, for more information if you need it. And I guess what I was saying earlier is that it seems to me that Skype, or rather Microsoft, who owns it, would figure that most of the calls being placed on Skype are just kind of like throwaway stuff, like people that don't need to record it. They're just, talking to relatives, or they're, trying to have virtual sex with someone halfway around the world, or something like that, where it's not really necessary to record it. But the people
they're keeping those files.
Oh yeah. What they're doing with it, I don't even want to know. But the point is, there is a war on podcasters, but just like everything else, where there is a problem, even more often there are solutions.
Even more often.
Yes.
Well, yeah, we're solving these problems every day. We are fortunate today, actually, to have some time to talk about some things. Our guest couldn't make it today, and she'll be back later. This is Lori McDonald, and she will be back to tell us all about alien abductions. And but she couldn't make it today, and so instead we decided we need to kind of catch up a little bit because we've been
our readers and our listeners. We want to address some concerns, comments, statements, manifestos, etc., etc.
Right. Well, YouTube comments, and we've had some interesting comments on our new YouTube channel.
Which you can access by, again, going to thechembo.com, which is THECHEMBOW.com. There's a link to the YouTube channel in there, as well as a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about later. But concerning the YouTube channel, we get comments every so often, and a lot of them are very, very nice, I must say. People are very supportive of our work. It's a very conducive atmosphere right now to get these sort of ideas out there. And I know, Sharon, you had some things you wanted to talk about pertaining to a couple of these comments.
Well, let's start with the comment on Laura Eisenhower's video from a vegan. And the vegan was criticizing our diet, both mine, Gabe's, and Laura, I think, because we were talking about the way we eat. Laura described herself as a flexitarian.
Yeah.
And
we're largely vegetarian. We eat a little bit of organic eggs and a little bit of cheese from time to time, but it's mostly, fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
That's mostly what we eat.
I put half and half in my coffee.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having the eggs from time to time. Everything in moderation.
Well, if they're organic eggs. We watched together the movie Baraka. That's the Ron Frick film that takes place all over the world. It was made in 1992, and this film shows cultures all over the world. It shows, the trials of life, spiritual practice, labor issues, people in sweatshops. It shows like everything going on, both the beautiful and the ugly. And one of the hardest things to look at in that film is the way chickens are raised. So he shows the poor little chicks. I don't want to sound like a PETA person that's saying don't eat eggs, don't eat meat.
Heaven forbid.
But I do think that it's good to be aware of what you eat and to understand where it came from, and if somebody suffered to bring that food to you. And the reason that I only eat organic eggs is because I can't bear the suffering of the chickens that are in these terrible conditions in these little cages, and when they burn off the little chick's beak to dull it, they dull the chicken's beaks. That's just one of the most heartbreaking things you'll ever see. So that's, after seeing the film again, I just said no more Denny's or anything on the road. If I'm desperate and need a meal. Incidentally, we saw Laurie McDonald at the Denny's in Joshua Tree during contact.
We had to.
But that was a retoxing moment. We had to retox. Yeah. It was just we were getting too high.
Yeah, you have to do it sometimes. You have to, come back down to earth. And, I think you agree with me, Sharon, that equally objectionable is the militant standpoint of organizations like PETA that are like, I don't like their practices at all. You can't be a Nazi about stuff like that. You can't force people to do anything, really. Voluntarism is the way to go.
Well, that brings me to the point then. Let's look at the contrast between the attitude of the commenter and another individual I know who's a vegan. The commenter said that if I need protein, I should just drink this green drink because it'll take care of everything for me. It's different for different people.
Yeah, maybe that works for them.
Yeah.
But it's not one thing that's a panacea for every person. It doesn't work like that.
And they said we'd be more in balance if we would eat like they did. What I find strange here is that people who eat a 98% vegetarian diet are being criticized. There are a lot of people with worse diets out there. And I think that
there are a lot of people with a 98% meat diet. I mean, what about them?
I think the vegan wouldn't even tackle that because it's just too difficult. I think that he or she probably felt like, oh, we're so close. We're so close. Why don't we go that extra distance? And I actually was a vegan for many years, and a strict vegan and a super annoying one. I was that person that was self-righteous, that would tell people why what they're eating is wrong.
And then I would be that person who would order extra bacon just to eat it in front of your face and show you that that's what I think of that attitude.
Well, I probably still would have had sex with you anyways, but
anyway. I would hope so.
But
but without the bacon.
Yeah, well, that never actually bothered me though. If a guy I liked did it, I was like, whatever, I like him. So, but I did get kind of self-righteous about it with my family and friends. So it's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
So the post did say that we were not in balance, and I just have to ask, well, was the poster using a cell phone to post that? Because I could say that energetically they weren't in balance because they used a cell phone, and I could get self-righteous about that because I know a lot about energy, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So it's just we all have our own things that we're really good at, and some people are really good with food. Like,
And we're gifting orgonite to the cell towers, What are you doing? Sorry, I don't mean to get
well,
like,
a
pissed
lot of
off or
people
anything.
think that just by being a vegan, they're doing such a service to the world. Believe me, I know because I was that annoying vegan, and I was so annoying. I mean, and I deprived myself too. Like I was on tour once. We played in San Luis Obispo. There was an all pot pie restaurant that we performed at with our live music, and I got a free meal out of it. And just because the pie, which was completely vegan, other than the crust was glazed with egg, just because the vegetarian pot pie was glazed with egg, I didn't eat it. And pot pie is like my favorite food. So, it's just you end up depriving yourself and not really living fully.
Well, we're going to have some pot pie in a couple hours after the show is done, so maybe that's some consolation.
That's true. We have a vegan pot pie actually already prepared for dinner tonight. So, in contrast to the comment on YouTube, I know somebody, Jessica Sentman, she's a fruitarian, and I met her when I was on Talk Network because she had a show called The Fruitarian, which was one of my very favorite shows on the network. And I'm not a vegan. I eat a very healthy, mostly vegetarian diet. But her show is all about fruitarianism, and that is a very extreme form of raw veganism where she just eats fruit and vegetables. And most of her meals are mono meals, large quantities of one fruit, like a dozen plums or a lunch of avocados. And dinner, often she'll eat a salad. So then she mixes vegetables, and it's a very, very extremely clean and healthy diet. And she's also a voluntarist. She got into voluntarism and Ron Paul years ago. She's very into the libertarian philosophy and that everyone should do what they want to do and they'll do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. We can't be forced.
Yeah, and adopting that attitude, that self-righteous attitude with someone else is not going to make them, more often than not, is not going to make them suddenly start to see things your way. That's not how, that's not the natural way of things. So it actually accomplishes the opposite.
Yeah.
Many times.
But she's very non-judgmental. She's very educational about it. And she keeps your interest because she's not self-righteous. So I do notice that it's possible to have a diet like that. Ken Rolla is another non-self-righteous raw vegan. Mm-hmm. So it is possible. I think they're...
But stop telling us that we're not in balance just because we have organic eggs and cheese from time to time.
Well, yeah. In a moderate diet, it's easier to maintain. When I was a strict vegan, I did it for about, a few years. I don't know. And then when I broke veganism, I was so embarrassed to do it. My ex-partner was a vegan too. We bought a pizza and we were so embarrassed that we hid the box. We couldn't even put it in the recycling bin lest someone see that we ate a pizza, because we were vegans. So, but now I think it's when you have a more moderate diet that's healthy, it's much easier to maintain. And when we deprive ourselves, it becomes difficult.
Yes. Everything in moderation, I say. So that's one comment. And another comment I wanted to address was our last episode, not our last episode, the one we did with Michelle Reimers, where we talked about the Akashic Records and accessing them. And there was a comment from a repeat commenter that it really kind of bothered me because I've noticed a lot of that same self-righteousness that we talk about. There's a lot of this I can only call it elitism in the New Age movement and keeping things secret and shrouding things in mystery and saying that only certain people can do this or only certain people can do that. And that's simply not the case. Anyone can do anything.
Yes, well, this comment was saying that only certain people could access the Akashic Records. And I have seen Michelle do this, and it was brilliant to witness it and to gain benefit from looking back through an object's records or through a person's records. I feel that anybody can do anything they put their minds to.
That's right. And I don't like elitism in general. And I really do not like comments like that. And that's one that especially got under my skin, because we encounter a lot of this type of attitude with orgonite and in orgone energy. There's a lot of people that are saying incorrect things, that it has to be a certain way, and when in reality it's far simpler than anyone even believes.
Well, can we agree to disagree? That's the question. And I think we can. And regarding the orgonite issue too, I've become really more relaxed about the whole idea of somebody saying one thing is the only way or one thing is wrong. Like, I've noticed people have completely different ways they make orgonite. And you know what? I think they all work within a certain framework as long as the right type of ingredients are in there. So, for example, Don Croft has said that DeWin Gardner is disinformation. Well, you know, he's also said Ken Rolla is disinfo, and so am I. And now I know why he said DeWin Gardner's disinfo is because DeWin says the chembuster is not the most effective tool for cleaning the sky.
And Don Croft invented the
yeah,
chembuster, and there's a little ego trip there.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
I think it's also not the best tool. I think, like DeWin, I agree that the Obelix is a much faster and cheaper way to do it. And all this
Certainly
stuff,
less labor intensive.
actually, you could see all this on our website. Go to the orgonite section of thekembo.com and scroll to the bottom, and you'll see other websites about orgonite and orgone energy devices. So I don't have to get into too much detail, but the Obelix is his best cure for chemtrails, and I find it to be extremely effective. Orgonite Austin, or DeWin Gardner, he's also known as Orgonite Austin, makes black sun orgonite using black iron, and that's something you can get at a break shop. Ken Rolla says don't use black iron, it's got stuff in it that's bad for you. So he doesn't agree, but DeWin Gardner says it works, and I know his stuff works based on his experiments. But Ken's stuff also works. You see, so you'll have maybe Don Croft saying, this guy's wrong. Ken might say, do it this way. What I'm finding is it all works. Like
Yes.
George Ritchell swears by aluminum. And
So do we.
And so do we.
And our tower busters.
A lot of people say don't use aluminum. But see how I'm seeing
But
is
we've experienced lots of success with it. So,
Yeah.
again, it all goes back to, everything works. I'd say the one exception to this, though, is that hippie crap that we see at some of these festivals. You know, that has all the chakra colors in it, and that has like the big BBs of metal in it, or they sometimes have seashells or sand in them. Sometimes there's no metal at all.
there's often no metal, or just BBs, like you said. Or,
That doesn't work.
yeah, you have to have very fine metal shavings. And actually, this kind of brings me to some of the questions we've been getting on Tumblr. So, okay, we've covered YouTube. We're not big social media people, in case you haven't guessed. I mean, you haven't found a Facebook page for either of us out there.
And you never will.
Right, I don't use Facebook. I could rant about that for a while, but
Let's not.
let's just talk about the blog, because I have a blog on Tumblr, which is thekembo.tumblr.com.
Which people can also access off of the main website, thekembo.com.
So I've been getting some questions lately, and somebody asked about the combination of crystals and orgonite. So this is a good chance to explain what's in orgonite again, because it's good to review. So Gabe, why don't you describe what's in orgonite, and then I'll address this question.
Well, orgonite is an orgone energy device. So some people will say terms like orgone crystals or something that doesn't really mean anything. But just to clarify, orgone energy, as discovered by Wilhelm Reich, is present with these devices. It's called orgonite, which was termed that by Karl Hans Wels in the 90s. And orgonite consists of fine metal shavings, very fine metal shavings, and quartz of some kind. You can use dust, you can use fragments, you can use big pieces if you want.
Ken Rolla recommends dust.
Yes.
For the more surface area. I find it very effective too.
Yes, he talks about the Casimir effect, and in both of the interviews that we've done with him.
And the piezoelectric properties.
Yes, and we use other stones sometimes, such as in our ziggurat pyramids. If the main stone is not a quartz-based stone, like a sodalite, for instance, we'll throw in just little nuggets of quartz. So as long as it has some quartz content, then that's how it needs to be. and as I said, fine metal shavings. We throw a copper coil in there, which is not technically necessary, but we feel that copper adds a nice effect to it, and it repels negative ions, so it's part of generating that negative ion force. And the last very important part of this is a catalyzing polyester resin. Now, to go back a little bit a ways to the hippie crap I mentioned earlier of these people that are making orgonite that does not have any particular function, there are a lot of people that insist on making it with beeswax or shellac or these other types of things to hold the ingredients together, but that are not a catalyzing polyester resin. And we had George Ritchell on the show, and he's explained before, it just doesn't work.
That's George Ritchell from Organize Africa, which you can also reach through our website and see what amazing work was done in Africa since 2002, gifting orgonite, gifting about 25,000 orgonite tower busters to restore the climate and bring back rain and remove all of the electromagnetic pollution and geoengineering from the sky.
Kind of puts our 3,000 to shame, doesn't it?
It really does. Well, we need to get a functioning vehicle which will help us gift. But at least we discovered the Rent-A-Wreck in Gorman. So now when we have to go down the grapevine, we'll make it. So,
well, once you have those ingredients together, then you have orgonite. And this is what we use for all of our pieces, the same basic recipe. And it's very effective.
I got a question on Tumblr about orgonite ingredients. This person asked if you could make a combination of shungite and quartz orgonite. And so what I answered to that was that all of our orgonite contains quartz. So absolutely you can mix any crystals you want in there. As long as there's quartz, you will have functioning orgonite. Sometimes I have found in the past when we first started, we did some without quartz with just calcites or other minerals, and they were very functional too. But the quartz is a way to really make sure that your orgonite's going to function because of its piezoelectric properties. Another question that I got, well, it wasn't really a question, it was a comment, but I actually answered it. And the comment was about a photo that was on this other Tumblr user's blog of orgonite breaking up clouds. And so I looked at it, and it was a beautiful photo she took of her orgonite working. What I explained to her was it actually wasn't breaking up the clouds as she thought. What was happening in the photo are the stages of transmutation. So one, it removes the metals by throwing them away from the earth. So all the chemtrail toxins are thrown to space. And then two, after those are removed and the dangerous EMF is neutralized, that's the other effect, you will have cloud formation because you've removed the excess particulates of heavy metals and you have negatively ionized the atmosphere, which promotes the hydrogen bond, which is how clouds form. So all of the moisture and humidity in the atmosphere can now come together through the hydrogen bond. So that was the clouds forming. And then the breaking up of the clouds that she photographed was actually the evaporation of the clouds after the entire process had taken place, which is the first thing that happens before the completely blue sky. Mm-hmm. So I got a nice response from her, and she appreciated the explanation. And I was really happy to do that because there's a lot of confused people out there about clouds. People who have just discovered chemtrails think everything they see in the sky is a chemtrail. Even beautiful clouds now are being portrayed in a negative light.
Yeah, it's a problem. And I feel that we do a good job of clearing a lot of the confusion up. On our website, we have a photo gallery where we show some of the really extreme examples of the odd shapes, the funnels, the spirals, the twisting and breaking up of the trails. And like you said, Sharon, some of the things that people will just automatically decide in their minds that, oh, that's geoengineering, that's chemtrails, that's them doing something to us, or that's HARP. A lot of times they'll just attribute everything to HARP. But in reality, these HARP is almost not even part of the picture. It's our own cell towers in our own neighborhoods and oftentimes in our own backyards that are contributing to this problem.
Because the problem is energetic. Because the problem is mostly caused by dangerous EMF. So the chemtrails being the visible factor in weather modification are the thing that people can easily identify. But the main factor in what's causing the drought is actually positive ionization and dangerous energy through these wireless technologies. The cell towers are like an array over our entire country, and they're set up in a grid fashion. So they actually do influence us more than HAARP. HAARP is part of it, and it's a weapon, and there are other weapons like this on Earth. But because orgone energy neutralizes it, we know that we can actually avert this World War III catastrophe that people think is going to happen through these technologies. It's easily stopped now. That's why I want to know, why aren't more people addressing orgone energy? And this brings me to another question I got from a Tumblr reader. It is about the film An Unconventional Shade of Grey, which is the new movie by Michael Murphy, who's the filmmaker of What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying? The question is, why is it being postponed? Why is the release being postponed? Well, I could start by saying he was working on a film called Who in the World is Spraying a few years ago. And not only did this film get postponed, it got completely taken off the shelf.
Oh, yeah, it got shut down.
I received an email from Los Angeles Skywatch at some point that explained why, finally, because I wondered, where did this film go? I saw a trailer for it. I want to know who was spraying.
That's like the $1 million question.
Yeah, everyone wants to know. So I was really excited to see it, and then it disappeared. And I went to the website, and it was gone. And then I found out from LA Skywatch that somebody who was working with Michael Murphy took his money and totally sabotaged the film. And of course I wasn't surprised, because this is sensitive information. But that was why Who in the World didn't come out. But then I have to ask the question, why is this next movie coming out instead of Who in the World is Spraying? Somebody stopped it.
Yep.
And it seems pretty clear.
It's very clear. And it became even clearer when we took a little time to watch the 5-minute trailer for this film. And oh boy, this, again, it's just the same thing. People are so focused on the visible aspects, the heavy metals, and just so fixated on it, and completely neglecting the invisible components, the electromagnetic properties of the positive ionizers and of the atmosphere.
And our own responsibility in cleaning it.
Yes.
Because it's up to each and every one of us. And, you know, the green movement was a totally different thing when I was younger. I was way into environmentalism from the time I first learned about the rainforest in 7th grade. I found out about the destruction of the rainforest. I started giving money to Greenpeace, and I was getting very passionate, writing letters, not just the rainforest, but things in my own country that I could actually do something about. I wrote letters to senators and congressmen, and I thought this would make a difference. But my 7th grade biology teacher taught me to do that, and I thought it was a good idea, so that's what I did. But I did other things too. I started a recycling program in school. I was kind of that annoying environmentalist that bothered everyone to do their part back when no one even knew about recycling.
Yeah.
And then when the Earth Summit happened, the thing that led to Agenda 21 in 1992, I was so happy that, because I didn't understand Agenda 21, I didn't realize what was happening. What was happening is the green movement was being hijacked. So I was a big environmentalist, and I thought Greenpeace was, on our side, and I didn't realize that all of these organizations were being hijacked by the global elite.
Mm-hmm. And they're all Rockefeller funded.
So I was kind of in that camp at that time, thinking about global warming. My parents actually bought me the Al Gore book for my birthday in 1992, and I was very excited, and I read the whole thing, and I ate it up because I was into that, and I thought that was what was going on. But I didn't really realize that the green movement had been hijacked. So I actually don't know why I went off on that tangent.
Well, we were talking about Michael Murphy and the film, and just what the part that the whole Agenda 21 agenda plays in the cover up, the massive cover up that's going on, and how even these alternative sources are just not reporting the truth.
Right. And the question was, why is the film being postponed? Well, I figure it's probably being postponed for the same reason that Who in the World is Spraying never came out at all. Mm-hmm. But now what I've noticed from the trailer was a little bit of a kind of misdirection. And I wonder why, after all these years, the filmmaking hasn't progressed. And I have a feeling it's because Michael Murphy can't say anything or he'll get killed.
Well, we met Michael Murphy not long ago. And in fact, not long after that trailer was recorded, I believe. And we have a video of it on our website.
Yeah,
just,
go to
just
the
a little
Vimeo
introduction.
page. I have a video of meeting Michael Murphy. Maybe I, barraged him too much because I liked his movies, and those films actually were what woke me up to chemtrails in the way that I am today. But he was very, he's kind of jittery. Dane Wigington said that he was on drugs, which I know is not true. I can tell it's not true.
But he does give off certain
Speedy vibes.
No. No. What I was going to say is that he exhibits some of the qualities of someone who is under heavy attack from mind control.
Yeah, it's not drugs. And you know how drugs can control your mind? Frequency can also control your mind.
It can and
It
does.
does. And, well, speaking with Michael Murphy, I realized and understood that he's going through something very difficult, and then he's under severe attack, and he's being watched, and I definitely think he's being controlled right now, and if he was to step out of line, that'd be the end for him. So
at least that's the impression we got, and nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors, but that's the vibe that we got, and we tried to explain some of the stuff that we saw in our observations, tried to talk with him, and we gave him a couple of tower busters, orgonite tower busters.
Well, I was moved because I gave him one, and after speaking with him, he asked me for another. So I was very moved by that because I think they can help him.
Well, I hope he still has them.
I hope so too, and I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
What I noticed about this film is there's a lot of misdirection, and I actually think Michael Murphy is a good person, and I don't blame him for this. I think he can't say everything he needs to say. But I also think that people are really stuck in the gloom matrix with geoengineering, and because the concepts we talk about with these energetic sources are so difficult to understand and so outside of what we've been taught and what our so-called reality is, it's just so hard for people to understand that I can understand why they don't realize there's more to this than heavy metals.
They only focus on the visible aspects because it's so hard to understand something that you can't even see. And there were several instances in that trailer, even like there was one part where they were talking with someone, and the person was talking about aerosols, and in the background they have a time lapse going of a natural cloud formation. Why would and
It was in the part with Bruce Douglas.
Yes.
Bruce Douglas is a chemtrails activist from Maui, and he was speaking about chemtrail aerosols or aerosol releases off of the coast that blow in. And while he was talking about this, the preview showed a natural cloud forming, not a chemtrail.
Like a time lapse.
So there's
plenty of examples of a time lapse of chemical clouds. Why wouldn't they choose that over a time lapse of a natural cloud formation? That's what I wanted.
This is neuro-linguistic programming. So they're going to show something really beautiful and natural, and they're going to say something devastating, because I'm starting to believe that they're literally programming us now to create the environmental destruction that they want. So they're programming us to see it. They're programming us to accept global warming, because they are literally reporting these huge discrepancies in temperature. Like here, last night, you went outside around 11:30 or midnight.
Yep.
It was 48 degrees. And I went online. I said, let's guess what weather is saying. And I guessed 63. It was 66. So that's an 18-degree discrepancy. Mm-hmm. And there is a reason for this. And I do think that they are deliberately misreporting so that we manifest through the power of our minds, which are constantly manifesting,
Yes.
that we manifest the destruction that they want. And by getting us in the doldrums, in the gloom and doom, we're going to manifest it. So what we have to do is learn the solutions. Now, there's a reason that these temperatures are being reported incorrectly, and there was a controversy about this. This was reported on Fox News, so this is pretty mainstream. This is an article in 2013 on Fox News Science online. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, had to close 600 weather stations because they were incorrectly reporting weather. They were placed in heat sinks.
600?
600 weather stations out of 9,000 were closed by NOAA because of a controversy with reporting incorrect temperatures greatly warmer than they actually were because these places were in heat sinks. So it's a deliberate misrepresentation of the data. So when Michael Murphy says in the trailer to this film that geoengineering is left out of climate models, so we can't get accurate assessments of global warming, he is correct. We cannot get an accurate assessment of global warming.
Yeah, that part is true.
It's so true. Well, a lot of what he says is true. And
Yes.
this is why I have this concern, is that there's just so much being left out. So in this case, he says that the geoengineering is left out of these models. It absolutely is. So is the just general energetic properties of the atmosphere. As Scott Stevens from weatherwars.info said on Kate's show, back when it was the Blue Sky Report and is now Backstory, he said that we are looking at weather from a thermodynamic model, not an energetic model. These people are all correct. I just want to know, why are they leaving out orgone energy? Why are they hinting at it sometimes and then leaving it out?
And what I want to know is why in this trailer, again, just like in the two previous films, are there only government and ex-government people talking?
Mostly government and ex-government. And that is a very good point you bring up. They have former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney talking about how the UN is going to end the sovereignty of nations. And they're going to geoengineer the atmosphere.
It was a rhetorical question. I know why they're on there.
There's more. There was a U.S. Air Force. He's a weather observer.
Yes.
From the U.S. Air Force. His name is Alan Buckman. He also worked for the U.S. Fish and Game. He was a U.S. Fish and Game biologist. So, I don't know, U.S. Fish and Game Department. Government.
Yep.
Government. And he's talking about the polar vortex.
What year is this?
Exactly. So, okay, well, I mean, now that might sound a little obscure to many, but the polar vortex was an issue back in around 2014, and I think maybe early 2015.
I think 13 and 14 is when it was.
13 and 14.
Yeah.
Well, when did it end? It ended
in 15.
and there was a widespread distribution of orgonite, and I actually watched day by day as the polar vortex was taken apart. It was dismantled. I watched the satellite image day after day after day. So this polar vortex that the U.S. Air Force weather observer and biologist has observed is done. So why is it in the film? I mean, okay, yes, they filmed it a while ago. Yes, but it's outdated information.
Completely.
Because that's been taken down. So now
It was artificial to begin with, and it was, as you said, it was dismantled.
it was dismantled.
No reason for it to even be there.
So now we've got to ask ourselves what made it go away. The film doesn't say it went away. Now there's time for them to add that because it hasn't been released yet, but they haven't said that it went away. So these energetic phenomena are left out. And like I mentioned earlier, the government people talking about the loss of sovereignty of nations. This is a real scary point for a lot of people. This is very, very frightening. They're talking about one world government. And this film is a lot about Agenda 21, the one world government, and control over all of humanity. These are terrifying ideas for us, and we want to have sovereignty of nations. What's not being talked about is that our nations aren't sovereign now. All of our governments are just corporations that work for a larger corporation, and all of these are governed by the UN. And there is something above the UN, and that is seriously the extraterrestrials and extra-dimensional beings that have been manipulating humanity for eons. And it can't be ignored forever. People talk about disclosure a lot.
Yep.
This cannot be ignored forever. And it's not going to be discovered through us, through the government telling us. It's going to be discovered through us figuring it out, as Gabe and I are figuring out.
Well, when
now.
you work with orgone energy, it sort of speeds up that process. So it's already underway. And yeah, just like you said, you can't keep the lid on it forever.
Well, so there's this big feeling of powerlessness when you look at a film like this, and there's no discussion of the energetic properties, because once we understand the energetic properties, we understand there's a solution. It's
No discussion
reversible.
of solutions.
Well, okay, Michael Murphy says, and I quote, "We demand that all geoengineering programs are stopped and all climate mandates are rescinded." I agree.
Yeah,
I
it sounds
agree.
great, but
But it's impossible, because you cannot file a lawsuit against who's doing that, because who's doing that is above the UN. How can you file a lawsuit?
how can you submit the paperwork? That's
Where
what
would you submit the paperwork? I mean, who are you suing and where are you suing them? The only way to stop it is energetically. This is a tough concept, because now we're getting into invisible things. We're getting into ETs and extra dimensional beings.
The really good stuff.
And that's what this is. So what's being covered up here is not geoengineering, because if it was being covered up, you couldn't just Google the Air Force document owning the weather in 2025.
Yeah, I just mentioned that earlier. That document is frighteningly easy to obtain.
Yeah,
it's too easy.
So what's being ignored here? Is geoengineering the biggest elephant in the room that's being ignored? Or is the ET presence on Earth and the cover-up of our life force energy the biggest elephant in the room that's being covered up?
What about the shape-shifting craft we saw?
And that's another one. So if you check out my blog, thekembo.tumblr.com, I just posted an article, so it should be on page 1, along with some answers to questions. But you'll see an article called Who. It's just called Who. And in this article, I discuss all of this. And what we did was we revisited what in the world?
Yes, the first one.
What in the world are they spraying? And I got 2 screenshots off of the film, and I've posted those screenshots, and I've written my analysis. And those screenshots are not airplanes spraying chemtrails.
Nope.
They are definitely an orb and another craft next to the orb, and both of them are the same formation, and they're both in different places against different backdrops.
And the crazy thing is, we never even noticed this when we watched that film for the first time somewhere back in 2012, was it?
Or
I wanna say?
2011, perhaps.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago, and we never saw those orbs and crafts. We thought they were planes. What was it that made me see it differently this time? Because I posted it online, and if you look at it, you'll totally know what I'm talking about. It's an orb and some other kind of strange craft that's not a plane. And I would think maybe it's a trick of the light. These are not planes. And I've seen them in real life too,
Yep.
orb sprayers.
It matches up with what we've seen before. We got 2 separate screenshots. I think one is at the 35-minute mark and the other is around the 38-minute mark. And they're 2 completely different ones, but like you said, it's the same formation.
And I see them in real life too. And so also explain to me this: how come I can watch a chemtrail sprayer in the sky and give it a message with my mind and see the trail and the plane disappear completely? And I've done this in front of people and they've seen it. So how does that happen?
And you've tripped them out for sure.
Oh yeah, it is trippy, but everyone can do it. And that's the beauty of it. And I first learned to do this with orgonite. It helped me. It was a tool to help me access the ability. So of course this film is going to talk about government and the UN. And when you're in that framework, there is no solution, because if you're in that framework, you are owned by them.
Yep.
And if you get into our framework, then you only own your own body and you are the only authority.
If you fight on their terms, you'll lose every time. It's all rigged. It's all set up for failure on your part, on my part, on our part. But if you play by your own rules and you're true to yourself and what you know is true, if you play by your terms, they don't stand a chance. And that's the most important part. And that's the message that we're trying to get out on this show. And I'd like to take a moment before we head into hour 2. We got a few minutes left, but I wanted to talk about our Etsy store and the products that we offer to people.
We just put up a ton of new stuff in our store, and everything that you get there does support our work gifting California and beyond. And I just want to recommend Tower Busters because they're kind of messy to make, and we offer them really cheaply. So if you don't want to make them yourself and you want to help support us, and you can have enough to gift your community for a really low price, just come visit.
These are cheap, tactical pieces. Again, the orgonite does not have to look nice, especially if it's just being tossed out into the wilderness. We mentioned at the top of the hour that people have to start taking responsibility for the electromagnetic pollution in their area. And this is something Dwayne says, and this is something that we say, and it's it's the most truthful thing that we've found in the 2+ years that we've been doing this work. People have to take responsibility, and it's not just these external sources, the cell phone towers. People take the poison into their lives. They bring in the Wi-Fi routers to blast themselves with frequencies that are not compatible with the human body, and they do this like it's without thinking about it, like it's second nature. And this is the kind of stuff that has to be stopped. This is the type of behavior that is giving way to a new behavior of responsibility and going out there and gifting your local cell towers and going back to the store. We have made it as accessible as possible.
We try to make
people.
We try to make it pretty cheap. And the more you get, the cheaper they are, because we want to help gifters. So if you wanted to get more than 20, just email us off our website and it'll be even cheaper, because we want everyone to gift. I mean, once you buy 20 of them, they're like only $7.50 a piece.
And you can email Sharon at fakeclouds@thekembo.com. That's one word, fakeclouds@thekembo.com. Or you can email me at blueskies, also one word, blueskies@thekembo.com. And our store is available on the website. It's the Scalar Vortex on Etsy, and we have lots of stuff to choose from there.
Well, before we go into hour 2, just on a note of hope, in addition to Orgonite, there's more you can do. And let's talk a little bit about how we can circumvent Agenda 21, because it's totally doable.
What happened to the first 20 agendas? That's what I want to know.
I know, right? They're all even more covered up. They're even more, it's like a bigger conspiracy. But what can you do? Definitely get Orgonite. But also, if you can opt out of your smart meter, then they're not spying on your electrical usage. And just a note, if you're low income, sign up for the low income discount with your utility, because then getting rid of the smart meter will be really, really cheap. It'll literally cost only $5 a month to opt out.
And if you live in Los Angeles, like we once did, it's free. That's right, it's free. LADWP will literally come to your house or apartment and take it out and install a true analog meter for free, no charge. Takes a couple follow-up phone calls. You kind of got to pester them a little bit, but it's free. I'd say the most prohibitive factor for people is the cost.
Yeah, another thing that you can do is change your attitude on what it is you want, because what Agenda 21 is doing is it's creating scarcity. What if you didn't even want what they were taking away? Now, some of it's stuff we need. They want to create water scarcity. Again, that's the orgonite. Take care of that with the orgonite. It'll rain like crazy.
There is no
and then
water
there's
scarcity.
Then there's no more drought. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
And but there's more than that. Let's think about what is it that we want in life. You know, they want to make gas expensive. They want to make water expensive. There's nothing wrong with conserving. If you're a kind of person that is not using tons of energy and water anyway, this might not even touch you. You know, you don't need to get a CFL bulb to save electricity. Just turn off the light when you leave the room. Mm-hmm. Just do the little things.
And actually get the incandescent bulb, because it's better for the environment, because it's not going to leach mercury into the landfill.
Exactly. And it actually takes way less energy to produce and dispose of.
That's right.
There's definitely ways that you can adapt your thinking. And another one is they don't want us driving. If you live in Los Angeles and you're driving, you're a sucker anyway. Because maybe they put in all this new rail and you think that's Agenda 21, they're taking over my city. Just use it.
Use the bike.
Use the bike.
It.
Use the
You get
use the
exercise.
rail. Yeah. I mean, so it's like you say, well, then I'm giving in. There's nothing wrong with biking and using public transport.
No.
Use what they give you if it's useful. And,
just like it's nothing wrong with making orgonite pyramids just because the Illuminati decided to to co-opt it and use it with their little dorky eye on the tip.
Yeah, exactly. So, if they give you something you can use, take advantage of it and use it. Mm-hmm. Don't, have an ego about it, and don't feel like, oh, I can't support it. If you ride on that train, do you realize you can get from all the way across Los Angeles for $1.75 in as many transfers as you want in 2 hours?
And get rid of those Wi-Fi routers. For God's sake, people. Just plug in with an Ethernet cable. That's all I gotta say. Anyhow, we got Gillian Jones of Green Eyed Monster in hour 2. Please hang on and stick with us. We'll be right back after this little break. Welcome back to Hour 2 of The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio, accessible at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Well, in Hour 2, we are joined by Gillian Jones, who co-hosts Green-Eyed Monster, a new show on American Freedom Radio, which airs on Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. PST. Gillian, thank you so much for joining The Human Frequency. Welcome.
No, I'm tickled pink. Thanks so much for having me. I love the idea of being on your show. I had a good chat with Sharon over orgone, and I said to her, what on earth do you mean you go around healing the earth? And then she explained.
Yeah, that's what we do. We throw them everywhere. I'm sure you have some over there in Australia, too. I mean, I know you have some of ours. So our friend Dean Ryan took one over there. I know that for sure, and I know we mailed one to someone, too.
Well, I Googled it, and there are people selling it. Orgone in
Great.
Australia somewhere.
That's excellent. Well, Gillian, thanks so much for being on our show today. Gillian is the host of Green-Eyed Monster here on American Freedom Radio, and that airs on Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time. And Gillian, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, firstly, Green-Eyed Monster with Sherry Fisher, who we got the name Green-Eyed Monster from. Yes, a little bit about me. Well, I'm an Australian, in case you can't tell by my voice, and I live in a cute little town in central Victoria, in the Central Highlands, in Victoria, in Australia, as I already said, and we have a lot of underground water here. And I was sort of pretty concerned about water, but that's not talking about my history, is it? In my history, I grew up a fairly privileged life, went to a private girls' school for 3 years. Then when I was 8 years of age, my father retired, and I got I moved from Brighton Church of England Girls' Grammar School to Violet Town State School. Violet Town's a cool name, isn't it?
Who's this?
I am from a family of 4 daughters. I'm the third, and my father bought a farm, so I was always incredibly horsey, and that thrills you, Sharon.
I know, you're so lucky. But isn't that every girl's dream to have a horse?
Yeah, it is. And I have the most divine horses. Anyway, so I have these Austrian cart horses, which are Palomino, and they sort of bred them to be friendly. The more I get to know horses, the more I think they're like dogs, actually.
There are actually a lot like dogs, and they're trainable, and they're your best friend.
I think you drew this very comparison yesterday, Sharon.
I was, because we were driving past some horses recently, because we live in a town with horses, and if I want to ride, I can. I just have to pay for an hour, or whatever it is. But yeah,
more than that, you can actually.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, I mean,
you can actually make friends with a horsey person, and they'll let you ride their horse, because we never have enough time to ride our horses. They never get as much work as they need.
Good idea. That's what I did when I was 15. I used to ride, and I had an arrangement where I took care of a horse in exchange for riding. So maybe I should work that out again.
I reckon.
It's a beautiful lifestyle that you have in Australia. And we're talking to you from the future. You're our guest from the future, like a whole day ahead of us.
I know. I know. I'll tell you what's going to happen. The sun's going to rise.
That's a relief.
That's boring.
Well, Gillian, we've enjoyed we've enjoyed your show, and you have a lot of knowledge on a variety of topics. I think one of the things we want to talk to you about today is your knowledge of Tibetan Buddhism, because that's a huge topic for me. I did Buddhist meditation for a long time, and I still do. I don't attend the classes anymore, or the ceremonies, but I would love for you to talk about your background in Buddhism.
Well, interestingly enough, I just said to you before we came into the show, I was listening to Jordan Maxwell and talking about gnosis. And I really agree with that, because gnosis is knowing and being a knower. And when that bloke, Siddhartha Gautama, became enlightened and they said to him, "What are you?" he said a word that's been translated into English as being, "I'm awake," or in other words, "I'm a knower," or in other words, "I'm Buddha." Buddha actually means being a knower, being, like to be awake, So when I was very young, I always wanted to meet a Tibetan Lama. And I had a very eccentric grandfather who I never met, who had told my mother that Tibetan Buddhism, the Tibetan Buddhist monks were real knowers and had, were very profound and understood the secrets of existence. And so this is the answer, that previous sentence is the answer my mother gave me, because I read a book by, I think it was by Rudyard Kipling, I think it was Kim, and a Tibetan Lama came over the hill. And when I read it, all my hair stood on end and all my clothes left my body. And I got this rush, this visualization of a Tibetan Lama. And I just went to my mother and said, what do you know about Tibetan Buddhism? I really wanted to meet a Tibetan Lama. So I wanted to meet one all my life. And then finally, as karma would have it, I ended up living on a hippie commune with a girl who I went to Melbourne Church of England Girls Grammar School with, Jane Strickland, who's an absolutely marvellous friend of mine still. I actually named my son Freeman after her father. And we ended up on this sort of, Range Rover hippie commune. We called ourselves Turak Cowboys or something. Anyway, we had this commune, and one of them was the sister, one of the shareholders in this commune, Kate. Her brother, Adrian Feldman, was one of the first Buddhist monks from Australia. He was a doctor, Dr. Adrian Feldman, so he became a Buddhist. So then Kate and her husband Chris came to visit the farm, and they were on their way up to Queensland. This is in 1976, to meet a Tibetan Lama called Lama Tubten Yeshi. And I said, I'm coming. So that was it. I went to meet this Tibetan Lama, and when I got there, the same thing happened. The day the Tibetan Lama arrived, he drove up the muddy road in the back of an old Jeep ute, a Jeepy ute, and all my hair stood on end and all my clothes left my body again. And I was just very interested, and I had karma to be able to just throw myself in and jump off a cliff. So I jumped in and had a look.
Wow. So
I didn't get all that. Can we start over?
So can you talk about the beginning
Yeah.
of your practice and how it started for you once you started doing the meditation practice?
Well, this is the thing. I think that everybody should follow the religion that they are the most comfortable with. And what I've really just been trying to describe, Gabe, is the fact that I feel I have the strongest attraction and feel the strongest safety in Tibetan Buddhism. But the aim of the exercise is, as I said in the beginning, is to know your own mind. So basically, when you first study Tibetan Buddhism, it's like a mind map. It's more than I wouldn't say more than a religion. I don't know if it's more than a religion or it's bigger than a dogma. It's
It
bigger
is.
than religion.
It's a
Yeah.
philosophy. It's a philosophy, and it's about universal consciousness.
It is. And so there's a particular beginner's course that you can do. It was laid out by some famous great yogi in the past that sort of laid out this mind map. And it talks about all the different realms of existence that mind can actually enter, and basically that it is a mind-created world. Now, that can be pretty challenging for the ego in the beginning, because you wonder, well, just for all the concepts, because we have such a sort of a solid view of the world. But anyway, I just started meditating and using my intellect at the same time in logical analysis of what the lamas were saying. And fortunately, Lama Yeshe would always say, don't believe a word I say, which is like the book written by the Dalai Lama, Essence of Refined Gold. You have to sort of chew it over and let it go, and only what makes sense, believe that. Because anything that doesn't make sense is quite possibly a misconception anyway.
Well, there's
I'm not
a
saying
lot there's a lot that's kind of cropping up in these modern times that is very challenging to the ego. And
Yeah, and we're also finding the mind connection to the world. Like when we were having a conversation the other day, and I talked about my perception of the world, and you said it was very much like Buddhism because I'm learning through the work with orgone energy, the mind connection to the world. But through the Buddhist meditation, I also gained that the knowledge of emptiness, and it took a long time to figure that one out. You know, that's the toughest one because that really shows how the mind is creating everything. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
and it freaks some people out
But
a lot.
I think that Gillian
I
can
can
explain
talk
this.
about emptiness.
I would love for you to explain the idea of emptiness and how it relates to how we create our world.
Well, this is the thing. You can get quite confused about emptiness because there's two types of emptiness, and you actually have to ask the teacher or yourself or the question when you're reading something on emptiness. Are they talking about the emptiness experienced in meditative equipoise, right? Which is the letting go of the false self and getting in touch with the basic original true nature, which is called the truth body or Dharmakaya, and I believe that other religions might call that God, might, emphasis on the word might, or are you talking about the emptiness of inherent self-existence, which means that things just exist on their own from their own side, which is another misconception. So that's the emptiness perceived in meditative equipoise, and the emptiness of interdependent origination. So in other words, everything has interdependent origination. And the personality is created by the second emptiness, the emptiness of interdependent, which means that everything has interdependent origination, which means that basically everything's constructed.
Well,
So that's sort of a second.
Yeah, we are aware of both of those, but I think as far as we go, we were referring more toward the latter.
Actually,
The emptiness of the personality.
I think
or phenomena.
everything. I think of everything. You know, the emptiness of everything, because the one of the exercises I learned the meditations for to discover the emptiness of the body was to learn that the possessor and the possessed can't be the same. So, is my mind my body? Well, you wouldn't say my body, because that implies that somebody else is that I am possessing the body, and you wouldn't say my mind. It's very confusing. The possessor and the possessed can't be the same.
Well, one way that a beginner's way to approach that emptiness of phenomena, is demonstrated. The thought that comes to mind when I first learned about that was a lama would pull a flower out of a vase and say, "Where is the flower?" And you immediately know that it's already left the plant, you know. And then you start pulling off all the petals, and then you just spread the flower, you know, into pieces. And then you hold up one petal and you say, "Is this the flower, or is this the flower?" Or like, "Where is the flower?" Or say the emptiness of a chair. If I pull all the chair to pieces, and I've just got a pile of wood, where is the chair? But then I can put that pile of wood back together again, and I've got the chair back again. But where is the chair?
But where is the chair? Is not a collection of parts. There is no chair.
Well, the chair is see, this is where you have to go into non-duality, because both truths are true at the same time.
Wow.
Because there is no chair and there is a chair.
This is like math class.
And that
very complicated.
Yeah, that's the highest view. That's the Madhyamika Prasangika school of philosophy, or what you could call non-duality. You know, a lot of people are talking about non-duality, like we're going to be interviewing this guy called Tim Rothschild because we like his name, Rothschild.
I interviewed him too on my last show.
All right. Did he talk about non-duality?
We talked about all kinds of things on the show, and I believe that was touched on. And that's actually something that's being touched on by a lot of people now.
Yep.
Getting away from duality. We had a couple of guests on this show also talk about that. That seems to be a big thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the emptiness. That's marrying the emptiness of phenomena and the emptiness in meditative equipoise. You have to be able to hold those two views at the same time without there being a contradiction. and then you have a pure view of the world, a clear view. You're a knower. It's a Gnostic vision. It's a knowing. So let's use my emotions. God knows why I'd want to choose them. But anyway, let's say this week I had a really hard time with my family, right? And I decided that I wasn't going to go to my mother's 90th birthday party. And because my youngest sister had behaved in a way which I just couldn't handle. Anyway, so I had to work through that. So I cried for a couple of days. And then, and I'm going, look, I can't be doing the right thing for this to feel right. And then my older sister saying, oh, you might have post-traumatic stress disorder. She's a psychologist, from being reared by this family. and anyway, I worked through it. But anyway, eventually I said to my sister, I actually am bigger than this. I'm going to have to rise above this, and I'm actually going to have to go to this party. Because I got back into my heart, So what I'm saying is I had to keep letting go of all these concepts and coming back to my true nature, which is my connectedness with all other beings. And my love is my biggest feeling and my biggest power. Because when you do perceive emptiness in meditative equipoise, so this is a very important point, you attain what you call big compassion, not just ordinary compassion, but real. It's called Bodhi, means sort of compassion, and I don't know what Chitta means, but when you get Bodhicitta,
it means the mind of compassion.
Exactly, that's true. So thank you for giving me the terminology back.
Yeah, that's cool. I studied it too, but you know so much more than I do.
And you both know so much more than I do. So I'm the novice here.
And that's on a relative level of truth. On an absolute level, we all know it. Yeah,
I know.
That's true. I love that, because what you're saying is we all have Buddha nature. Every one of us, even Hitler, has Buddha nature. And that's what people don't understand, is the worst, most terrible person in the world you think is terrible, it's their delusions that are terrible, not them. Mm-hmm. It's the mind needs to be fixed.
Exactly. And to have that attitude to your own mind is really good, and to the other is exactly it. And so you don't get angry with the sister, you just get angry with her. Just go, she's so deluded, you know what I mean? And then you just give up on the delusion, and you can't really hate once you have Bodhi mind.
In other words, you don't take it personally.
That's right. You don't take it personally.
Yeah, but if you do, because you have the habit of riding on the relative mind stream of taking it personally, because you have the reference point of a body, and there's subject and object, right? Because we've entered the relative world, then you have to, that's why non-duality is so good, because when you can bring that in, the underlying nature overcomes those things as being solid.
Yeah. Well, the great compassion that you talk about is actually how I've been dealing with people in my life that have been causing me what I think are problems. But what we learned from our Buddhist studies is that we actually don't have any problems. Like if our car breaks down, we don't have a problem. The car is having a problem, but that we don't have a problem. We're still here. We're fine, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. I've been using these ideas.
Problem.
It's
sort of. I mean, yeah.
Well, it seems like we have a problem, but I tend to fall into that a lot, and I've been working on separating myself from these external things, and I like what you said about dealing with family, because for a long time I was having problems with fighting with my sister, and I learned about the fact it's really not her fault. She's not a bad person. She has some delusions that keep us from being able to communicate, and then we have to look with compassion, because then those delusions cause suffering. And one of the main things we look at in Buddhism that helps with compassion is suffering.
Yes. Or dukkha. Now that's a very interesting concept, because
we both have Jewish families. It's a mess.
I think that's great.
Just watch your average Seinfeld episode and you'll get an idea of what the family is like.
I love it. I love it. That's what my family's like, and they're not even Jewish.
It must be universal.
Mine's worse. I think it
I don't
is.
know
Yeah.
if yours couldn't be worse than mine.
Well, it's not a contest.
All right.
Mhm.
But let's talk about the suffering. So, what does it mean when Buddha says you must know suffering?
Well, actually, the original word is dukkha. And a Sanskrit scholar, I actually ended up teaching comparative religion at Chevelin Primary School, a primary school in Queensland for a few years. And so I actually had to explain this to children. And what I used to do is I'd bring in somebody, different religious person every week, because I see them as all as paths to self-knowing, right? Anyway, if you use them correctly. Anyway, so this Sanskrit scholar, who happened to be, I think he was I'm not sure if he was a Baha'i. I think he was a Baha'i. Anyway, he said the word dukkha actually means a wheel wobble in Sanskrit. Now, if you think about it, it's like a wheel wobble is because things aren't spinning around the center correctly. Everything's out of balance. So that out of balance of your mind, not being centered, not being in your heart, as we were speaking, in touch with your truth body, your dharmakaya, and not acting, from your compassionate heart, is the suffering. That's the wheel wobble. So you're out of balance because you're not in the center. There's no wheel wobble in the center of the wheel. So Buddha taught dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the path leading to the cessation of dukkha. And they are actually called the Four Truths of the Noble-Minded Ones, which has been translated in Western parlance to mean called the Four Noble Truths. It's not that the truths are noble, but they are, but it's the four truths of Arya beings, or people who have perceived emptiness. So there's suffering, or dukkha, the fact that things are out of balance and we're in samsara being the cycle. We're more stuck on the outside of the circle. Yep. The cause of dukkha, which is, or the cause of suffering. What is the cause of suffering? It's believing in these false views created by the false self, which has been constructed and by all sorts of sociological and previous experiences. There's a cessation of suffering. It's the third noble truth, which is letting go of those misconceptions. And there's the path leading to the cessation, which is analytical meditation, basically, and meditative equipoise, gaining the concentration to be able to go into one-pointed concentration, which you would call samadhi. Once you're in one-pointed concentration, then the busy mind is no longer talking. And then once you let go, which particularly, this is why I really like Tibetan Tantras, because we'll get back to that in a minute, because otherwise I'll get too sidetracked. Then when you let go of the false self, then you experience the big self, or big mind, which is the enlightened mind.
It's really a huge practice, and what I love about
it's hard.
It's very complicated, but it's not. See, what you have to do is not. These are huge ideas, but you have to just take it one step at a time, and to start to develop one-pointed concentration. The first thing you can do is just meditate on the breath. Just literally watch the breath, and if any thought comes, rather than fight it, just accept that it comes through, and then just let it go. Don't latch onto it.
But it really makes you aware of just how many thought forms are coming in, and at such a rate. Because when you take just that time, like I for example do 15 minutes is even tough for me. I try and stick with the 10-minute meditation, and there's so many thought forms, yeah. and it's just I like your analogy, Sharon, of thinking of it as a passing cloud.
Yeah, you just let it. What you do is you don't latch onto it, and don't beat yourself up about it either. It's just a step-by-step process.
but it just makes you aware that, because in our everyday life, we're not even thinking about it. But when you sit down in that state, it really makes you think, wow, there's a lot of mind activity here. And it's not something, as you said, to be fought. It's something to just at least to be aware of. That's the first step here.
It's a
But
training.
you just said the ultimate word. It's called aware. Because you're watching what is arising. And the thoughts are coming and going. And you must be Tibetan Buddhist trained, because that's exactly, the terminology that Tibetan Buddhists use. You watch the thoughts come and go like a cloud in the sky.
Exactly.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because we talk a lot on our show about all of the external factors that are there, that are set to make us unaware, to suppress our awareness, be they the genetically modified food or the heavy metals in the vaccines or the chemtrails or the smart meters or whatever source they come from. They are there to prevent this awareness, and it takes that dedication to just sit down. And I'm just beginning myself.
It is hard with all of these bombardments and pollutants to get this concentration. And I do think that's a lot of the agenda behind a lot of the attacks on us, is to keep us from realizing this true nature, because it's so pure, and once you're there, you don't even want anything anymore, so there's nothing for them to take away.
Yep.
Well, Gabe, I reckon you should cut your meditation time down to 5 minutes. And I'm serious.
Can I have that in writing?
Yeah. I'll type it in Skype.
Because sign it in vermilion.
Yeah. I remember one time I was so attached to my busy mind because I hadn't been meditating, right? And then I was going, I've got to meditate. I don't want to meditate. I don't want to stop thinking. I like thinking. I've got to worry. That's right. I was worried. I've got to worry about this. And then I thought, all right, well, I will worry myself sick in 5 minutes' time. But just for the next 5 minutes, I will just let go. So that's what I'd do if I was you. I'd cut it back to the point where you just say, okay, all the thoughts I can have, they're not your enemy, right? They're useful, or you think they're useful anyway, and they are useful. I'll just relax just for 5 minutes, and then I'll start again. Lama Yeshe used to say sleep is the best meditation.
I had a friend once say, I like to worship God from the comfort of my own bed.
Well, I'm sure you can. I mean, I know you can.
Well, you can at all times.
Hours. Yeah, exactly.
Even when you're in the future, such as where you are.
Exactly.
Our guest from the future.
From the future, I predict that you will be able to just relax just for 5 minutes and enjoy the lessening of the frenetic monkey mind thinking,
It's a great idea.
You can welcome it back.
It's like working out. You don't just go right into, for a marathon. You'll have to start by running a mile if you can and build up.
Mm-hmm. And then build up 26 more times, and then then you're there.
And then you start losing your toenails.
And then you become addicted to it. Then you love it after a few days. It only takes a few days. And another option is you could actually try doing it twice a day.
Well, I like to do it twice a day. I like to do it twice a day because it's a great way to begin and end a day. And it's much better than ending your day with TV or the computer. And also, it's more conducive to sleep, because when I end the day by looking at my computer, I can't fall asleep because the LED light is burning my retinas and, disturbing the circadian rhythms. So it's a nice way to end the day. It's relaxing.
Wait, we're talking about meditation still, right?
Yeah. So I like to do that before bed.
That's before you get your chance, Gabe, okay?
No comments.
What were you meaning? We're talking about meditation.
I
didn't know what you...
I'm sorry, I'm being too serious, but I do want to ask more about the noble truth of it's the ego, it's the grasping to our ego that is causing our suffering. And I noticed that definitely is the case. And what I love about Tibetan Buddhism is it's such a logical religion. It's all just you could put it all together logically and it makes total sense. And I realize if I'm worried about me all the time, I'm not going to feel very good because I'm worried about every little thing. And if I think about someone else, then I'm not worried about myself and my suffering diminishes.
Exactly. If you care about somebody else, then the focus goes from the reference point A to reference point B, and then that's the difference between a contraction and an expansion. It's like and that's a mental habit. Because the mind is wired like that. You have the habit of, you create the habit of compassion. That's why sometimes they say enlightenment, actually, even though we are naturally enlightened, complete enlightenment, particularly from the reference points we're coming from, is actually created.
What is the expansion?
Because it's the marriage of... You're gone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Continue, and then I have a question.
No, don't worry. There's a guy called Thaddeus Golas. I tried to listen to him. His voice didn't quite do it for me, but I did read his book called The Lazy Man's Path to Enlightenment. And he said, this isn't Tibetan Buddhism. But it's the same. It's all milk from the same bowl, as they say. He talked about soul and gel. He said all there is contraction and expansion, soul and gel. Complete soul is complete expansion and complete gel is complete contraction. So the only thing that really stops us from being completely and fully expanded is the false self. And this is another point I'd like to make. Yes, ego is a good and important thing, the way that it's defined in Western terminology, but we're not talking about that ego. We're talking about the false self, the over-clinging to the me, 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 me mantra. This is why sort of the wheel of life in the Tibetan tankas, the Tibetan paintings, they probably come from the sort of Vedics anyway, and there's ignorance, hatred, and greed. Well, the root is ignorance, right? This is in answer to your noble truths. The root of suffering is ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of your own true nature. Out of that ignorance, you arises the subject and object, which creates attachment and aversion. There's a really good Buddhist meditation for smashing that false self called Enemy, Friend, Stranger meditation. Have you done that one? Been taught that one, Sharon?
That sounds like a different way of saying something else that I have done, which is about developing equanimity. So you think about the people that you like and the people that you dislike and the people that you are neutral about. So I think that is actually the same thing that I was working on. So yes, please describe this meditation. It's extremely useful.
Well, I just want to say something real quick before I forget it, is that I think it's very interesting that you mention contraction and expansion, because there are those same two things in orgonomy, which is the study of orgone energy. There is a contraction and an expansion, and it's very interesting.
Tell me, I'm more interested in that because I already know what I know. Tell me about the contraction and expansion of orgone energy.
Well, when Wilhelm Reich discovered the orgone energy in his patients, he learned that this energy was the life force, so it's the chi or prana of the person. And what he found was that he was studying cancer and what causes cancer. And he found that when a person had a contracted orgone, their life force energy was in a state of contraction, that was leading to disease. And when it was in a state of expansion, that was a healthy state. And the cause of the expansion and contraction was emotional. So when people had a lot of emotional problems and difficulties, then they would have this contracted orgone. Let's say they didn't have natural loving relationships in their life. Something was causing their life force to contract. And when they had a healthy sex life with their partner, or they had a healthy diet and had friends that they enjoyed seeing, then they were happy and expanded. So it sounds very similar.
Well, that's really interesting. I'll come to it, back to orgone in a second. Because I was listening to a show earlier on and the people were saying, and you get cancer from all this shit food and blah, 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 blah. And I was thinking, yeah, but actually you can eat utter crap. And if you've got a happy, loving mind, it won't affect you anything like people who can be on completely healthy organic food and they get cancer.
We know
Because
somebody who
all
did.
cancer,
Yes.
We know someone
yeah.
who was a vegan and very healthy
My dad's
diet.
best friend, well, his only friend, he ate vegan for almost all of his life, and he died at I believe 65 or 66.
Yeah, it's not, like bodhicitta purifies, cures all those things. Not only that, it goes into your genetic information and it actually informs generations below you. So it's the kindest thing you can do if you're going to have children, is develop your compassion.
So this is an interesting thing that you bring up about the genetic aspect to this, because I'm starting to hear more about the that our traits that we acquire aren't necessarily from the DNA but from the consciousness. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know. I'm not an expert, but what I'm saying, it is what I'm alluding to. Yes,
It sounds
I
related.
know that there's yeah, there is genetic information. Um, a- and can you repeat your question?
Well, I was asking about the if we are acquiring some of our traits through our consciousness as opposed to our genetic blueprint, or if the genetic blueprint is created by consciousness. We had a scientist on our
Oh,
show who talked
consciousness
about
has to
this.
come first.
Yeah,
I
that's what I
really
think.
believe consciousness overrides it. It's bigger
Yeah.
because
Well,
it's bigger than the relative truth of the DNA, because DNA is only relative.
well, yeah. What Sharon was saying is that we had a scientist and electrical engineer, Ken Rolla, on our show. We had him on
Hmm.
twice, and he talked about how genetically modified food can actually be reverted back to heirloom because the the coding is in the consciousness of the plant, not in the actual DNA.
So I'm seeing DNA as actually a physical representation of consciousness, and that explains why we have so many inactive DNA strands. It all kind of relates. As we expand our consciousness, we'll activate those strands.
I agree. I agree. Now, look, I want to change the subject soon because hopefully my son Freeman Trebilcock, who used to be a Tibetan Buddhist monk himself, is listening. And I did tell him, and otherwise we'll give him the podcast. He's actually making a film at the moment called Forging Ned Kelly, and it's about the psychological makeup of Ned Kelly, and it's to do with Freeman getting some parking fines. I'm sorry to change the subject.
No, this is
Or we can
interesting.
change the subject.
No,
Yeah.
go
So he's
for it.
making. Yeah, so Free's making a film about parking fines. Now, what happened was I had a car that I very stupidly put in my name. I bought it for Freeman, and I bought it for Freeman. And then, for some reason, Freeman didn't have a license at the time. The car went into my name. He was working for a fabulous man in Melbourne called Father Bob Maguire, doing uh, food for the homeless people. And the car accumulated 21 parking fines. I think it accumulated 17, all in my name. And then the sheriff came to arrest me. And then I went to court and I mucked the whole thing up. And anyway, the whole thing is we got this huge parking fine. So Freeman is now doing his master's in filmmaking at the Victorian College of the Arts, which is a very sort of prestigious name at Melbourne University, or it's been incorporated into Melbourne University. I think it may have been a standalone school. Anyway, he's doing his master's in documentary filmmaking, and so he decided to make a documentary about parking fines. And Ned Kelly, who's a famous Australian hero, who decided to fight the injustice of the police state of Victoria, where the Irish sovereign family had arrived. So basically, he gets these parking fines and puts them in his glove box, and after that goes on a huge mission, and I won't tell you the end of the film. But I said to Freeman, that I would ask him. I would ask about parking fines from you, Gabriel, and because we need a couple of important sort of bits. Even though the film's nearly finished, we still have to get. We're actually getting Vin Byrne, hopefully, to do the Irish voiceover of the ancient Irish sort of wisdom. But, you know, we need more information on parking fines in the current situation. And I thought we'd grab any information we could from you on it, Gabe, because somehow I'm involved in this because Freeman's involved me, and I dreamt I was in the director's chair, and then the next morning he got me to come and look at this film he was making and put me in the director's chair, and I said, this is really weird. But anyway, he loves my contribution of ideas, and you are my contribution of ideas, Gabe, about parking fines. And so in this, yes, just do tell us. I don't want to, the film isn't finished yet. It's not due until the 7th of September, so...
Well, speaking of wisdom, I'm going to utilize a bit of wisdom myself, and I'm going to defer to Sharon. No. I'm going to defer to Sharon for a moment.
Oh, no, now I'm on the spot. Well, first off, I can't wait to see this film. It sounds awesome. I love stuff like this.
It's only 20 minutes, too. Yeah,
oh, good.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, good, so it's not too long.
Yep. No.
No, but it sounds really
it's
good.
It's like my new 5-minute meditation.
Oh, it sounds very interesting.
Yes.
And my attention span can handle 20 minutes. So,
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We've been not talking as much about the legal name registration lately because it's very misunderstood, and people are taking things incorrectly, and it's causing problems. So
not that we're assuming that would apply to you or your son, obviously.
But it's something we haven't been talking as much lately because I don't want to be held responsible for people's misunderstandings and errors. But with that said, I think that we can give you a brief explanation, but I don't know how it works in Australia, but we can give a brief explanation of how it works here, and I will now defer back to Gabriel.
Well, the thing about the legal name registration is that I feel like the main issue here is the fact that in the United States, at least, and probably everywhere else in the world, we do not operate under common law, which is the law of the land. And Jordan Maxwell talks about this ad infinitum. But we operate rather under maritime law, which is also called admiralty law or contract law, international private law, basically, and have been doing so since 1933. And what started happening that year was the United States used to be a country from its inception in 1776 until the Civil War began in 1861. At that point, the country became a corporation. And further along the line, that corporation became broke in 1933. And what happened was birth certificates began to be issued for all new births. And on those birth certificates was a first, middle, and last name. However, only corporations can have first, middle, and last names. So what was happening here was these new births, the family name and the given name were being tied in with this fictitious corporation that was being created at the moment of birth. And when the parents sign that birth certificate, the name holders of that first, middle, last name become the United States Corporation.
You're pretty much signing away your children, and that's the same thing that happens
unknowingly, of course, but that's what's happening.
And that's
I
what
did
happens.
not want to register Freeman. That's the joke. I didn't want to register him, but I did it, but just out of instinct. I thought, why should I register him? I thought, this might cause problems later. So anyway, he's registered. So he's been sold on the share market, I suppose. But do keep going because Freeman is listening. He's just sent me a message saying he is listening and he really wants you to keep going.
Oh, good. Well, I'll try my best. But anyhow, your standpoint on that is shared by many, many other people. They don't want this to happen anymore, but they feel like any way of opting out is just going to create problems. And it does for the people who don't know how to do it correctly. That's what the whole sovereign citizen
They don't know what they're doing. The sovereign citizens are just
Which is me.
You're going to get yourself thrown in jail doing that.
They
what you
tried to throw me in jail. So Freeman's paying the fines at the moment.
well,
Because this is the thing that happened to him. I'll get back to it in a second. But because his mother nearly got thrown in jail and the sheriff was here with a divvy van to arrest me, and I just managed to talk my way out of it and postpone. He's now paying these huge parking fines. And one of the prizes for contributing to his fundraiser is a signed parking ticket by Freeman. But the fundraiser's finished. And anyway, do go on. So
okay.
get back to this, Gabe.
So one of the many issues with tying that living human in with the fictitious first, middle, last name is the exploitation, financially and otherwise, that arises for years afterwards. But there is a process by which we are actually supposed to register that with that fictitious entity, that business entity, with the Secretary of State of any of the 50 U.S. states.
It'll be different in different countries, but there must be a process everywhere. I cannot speak for how it works in Australia, but
we don't know
there
that
is a
yet.
process in the United States whereby you register.
See, it is the same.
Well, what you do is you
See, it
register.
is the same as English law. It's the same as English law.
Well, what you
we
do,
have the same law.
What you do is you register that first, middle, last name that's on your birth certificate as a business entity. And once you do that, that effectively removes the name holding rights of the United States government and transfers it to you, the living human. You are now the name holder, not the owner, because no living human can own anything. Because again, we're under maritime law.
But you have to be very careful when you do this process, because you have to make sure that the name holder is not a first, middle, last name. You have to make sure that when you do this, it makes it complicated if you're doing it online or on paper. You're going to have to reverse. The first name is going to be what is the family name, then comma, and the last name is going to be the given name. So what you have to do
It's a little
it's a
confusing.
little confusing, and that's why I refer people to a website where they can read about it. And the way you find this website is go to scribed.com. That's SCRIBD.com, and look up the name Douglas Joseph Herrick, Herich. That is the business entity in which the man, Doug, holds the name and operates in commerce. And he explains how it works.
Operates legally in commerce.
Yes, operates
because
legally.
we're actually supposed to do this.
Yeah.
And anyone who does not do it is technically breaking the
And
law.
because we're not in compliance, we become subject to things like parking tickets and traffic tickets, because there's a contract between this entity and the state. But when you do this, there is no longer a contract between the entity and the state. And you cannot ticket a living man. You can only ticket the business entity, because everything in commerce is fiction.
And the business entity does not have a contract, ideally, with the corporation known as the Department of Motor Vehicles. So there's no liability.
And I think that's all we could say on it, because we're not experts and we don't want people making mistakes, but we recommend that you go and look at this website, scribed.com.
This is the best resource that we can offer.
It's really the only resource I know of that explains what to do. So it's the business entity name you're going to look up is Douglas Joseph Herrick, Herich, on scribed.com. Let him explain.
I'm going to answer
really...
the phone. I'm going to answer this. Just keep talking.
Maybe it's the government calling.
Well, I mean, I actually just received an email about this morning again. Somebody wanted to know information, and I did answer, but I said I wasn't going to talk about it anymore, and here I am talking about it. But that's why I want to keep it brief, and I think it's very important that you read about it and understand it before doing it, because it changes everything. You got to change your way of thinking.
It requires
if you
a
want to be free.
complete 180
Yeah.
in the way you think, the terminology used.
Yeah.
It goes very, very deep. This is the deepest rabbit hole yet.
It is extremely deep.
We recommend that everyone, if they want to know about this, they go to scribed.com, SCRIBD.com, and the business entity is Douglas Joseph Herrick, Herich.
And the name holder is Doug,
Doug,
who is a very, very knowledgeable man
so-
that I love to listen to and read. So check that
Okay,
out.
so so that basically means that Ned Kelly in 1850 or whenever he was, had this same problem. So he had a problem with the police. Um, well, it wasn't over parking tickets. So no, I think we'll stick with parking tickets. We'll stick with parking tickets. But this has been going on for a long time, hasn't it? I mean,
Yes.
how
Oh, yeah.
long have, yeah,
This is
how long?
actually part of a greater enslavement. So it's just important. Actually, it's important to listen to Jordan Maxwell. So listen to Jordan Maxwell show on American Freedom Radio, and he explains the roots of this. He doesn't explain the
Oh,
legal
well,
name
Freeman
registration.
actually, I might try and see if Freeman can actually have a Skype conversation with Jordan.
Yeah, because he can explain where it all
Um,
started. And this goes way back. This is part of the enslavement. This is actually one of the biggest parts of the enslavement of humanity and turning humans into commodities, which is what they've done and what we're undoing through this process.
Yes, and it is good to reference Jordan's work. So yes, people can listen to the Jordan Maxwell show, and they can also listen to Green Eyed Monster, which is your show. And I wanted to give you a moment to talk about your show. It's on Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. PST. I know that much. If there's anything you'd like to say about it, we got 3 or 4 minutes left. So please, by all means, go ahead.
well, I have the wonderful, scintillating, and hilarious Sherry Fisher as a co-host. I'd been looking around for a long time for a co-host that I thought I could work with, and one day Stephen Roberts actually introduced me to Sherry, and I thought, well, actually, she invited me on her show. And I couldn't go on her show because at that time I had become, what's the word that is more polite than unpopular?
Do you pop out at parties? Are you unpopular?
I upset a few people by I rattled a few cages. And
Oh, good for you.
on that, well, exactly. I mean, but anyway, look, who knows? But anyway, but I'm actually at peace with those people at the moment. But anyway, so I couldn't go on her show, and I said, no, you'll have to come on my show. Come with me and Chuck O'Celli on American Freedom Radio. And I think I bashed Chuck O'Celli up a few too many times, and as soon as I threw him Sherry Fisher, he was delighted because she's a lot more cute and sparky. So anyway, then Sherry and I did a few shows, and then one day we said to Danny Romero, can we please have our own show? And he said, yeah, I'd love you to have your own show. So Sherry and I started a show, and we called it Green Eyed Monster because actually after Sherry, because Sherry is a green-eyed monster, and she has green eyes, yeah, and she's a monster. And someone had named her green-eyed monster because she's a monster with green eyes. Anyway, so we have a lot of fun. We probably have more fun off air than we do on air. We're still trying to find our stride. We've only had the show going for about a month, is it now? Maybe a little bit longer.
Well, so
anyway,
far,
we're
so
pretty
good.
delighted. Yeah, we're loving it. And we've got Max Egan on. And we're going to
Awesome.
talk about ayahuasca.
Awesome.
I know.
Great.
Hey, I was listening to
Yeah, I
on
wanna know-
Rupert's show talking about ayahuasca. That's great.
Yeah.
Did they really get into it? Or was Max a little bit closed?
No, well, from what I heard, he was talking about it, and then I had to go, so I didn't hear the whole show, and I have to check it back later. But definitely, I want everybody to tune into your show on Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time. That's exciting that you've got Max Egan on this week.
Well, we both clicked with Max. I did go on a show with Max, and there are a couple of Irishmen who went in there and embarrassed him and bashed him up a bit first. So I wasn't very comfortable in that show.
And
But you're going.
And people can go to the archives and see your show afterwards if they choose to, and they can also come and check out our show, The Human Frequency, on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. They can donate to them, all of the programs that are on there. They can come to our website, thekembo.com, where they can find our Etsy store, they can find our YouTube channel, our blog, and they can find all the wonderful things they're doing. They can email us if they have any questions. And Gillian, thank you so much for joining us on The Human Frequency. We really appreciate it.
Look, I'm just absolutely delighted. I really love talking to you. I would love to invite you on our show. I'll get that other monster to agree to that idea soon.
Well, we
Wonderful.
look forward to
yeah,
it.
thank you.
You've been listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. Please tune in next time. Thank you.